Hey friends, welcome back. Today we're going to be doing a quarterly check-in, talking about all of the bookish stats from the first 3 months of the year, tell you a couple of my favorites, and kind of just reflect on how the year is going so far in terms of content, my feelings, my reading, my goals. I'll leave little timestamps down below so you can skip to whatever parts interest you, but let's just get on into it. I just kicked you. I'm so sorry. And this design just came off on my thumb. This is why we can't have nice things. All of these stats are going to only be including January, February, and March, since that's like the first quarter of the year. Fun fact, I actually had this video slotted for the beginning of May because I thought, so silly, in my brain, I was like, okay, the first quarter of the year is 4 months because quarter means usually 4. Right? No, Sydney, there are 12 months, 4 quarters. That means that there are 3 months per quarter. So recently I was like, how are people coming out with their quarterly stats already? Like April's not even over. And it actually took me far too long to actually realize my mistake. So we're just going to keep moving on and do our best. So in the first quarter of the year, which is 3 months worth, I read 32 books. That is 11 books in January, 13 books in February, and 8 books in March. I was really proud of these numbers, especially because I remember last year, January was like one of my strongest reading months, and that was because I was doing my first ever like reading booktuber's best video. And so I like heavily read in January because my TBR was big in terms of what I had to read or wanted to read for the content I wanted to create. And that was the same this year, but also February was just as busy because I added in reading your guys' best and worst books of 2023, and that was super fun. I also did my annual, romance reading vlog. Last year I did it with Kindle Unlimited, and I did that again this year, except I did it a little bit differently. So it was fun. I really have enjoyed the content that I've made for this first quarter of the year for sure. And then I'm sure you've heard me say it at least once before if this isn't your first video for me. March was a little bit of a rough month for me in terms of just like how it went. I wasn't necessarily super excited about every single book I was reading in March. Mental health wasn't that great. I was just super busy and I got really sick. So March just like wasn't the best month, but January, February, they were stellar. 10 out of 10. Would recommend to a friend. So I made all these like monthly shelves for my bullet journal this year, and I did obviously how many books I've read per month, but also in terms of pages read per month. We have this little bar graph. You see how the first 2 months I had to go down into the second little area because I read way more than I thought that I ever would when I was making the graph. In January, I read 5,592 pages. In February, 5,623 pages. And then March was 2,836 pages. So quite a drop, still a cute number, not mad about it. The only thing I am a little bit mad about is that with this bar chart, I did pages and words because one of my goals of this year is to write more, and 0 words, 0 words, 0 words. So we'll talk about it a little bit more in the goals section of this video, but I'm not like beating myself up about it, but I am just pointing out that like if you saw it, yeah, it's true. I have not written anything in the first quarter, at least. It'll change, mark my words. Now talking about these books, these pages, what genre were they, right? One of my favorite stats to see because I am often surprised. I don't really realize what I'm gravitating towards until I see a visual representation because that's how my brain works. But here's the representation, okay? We have fantasy clocking in at the top with 10 books, which totally makes sense. It's my favorite genre. Then tied at 6 books, we have fiction and romance. Fiction, I just looped in together like literary and contemporary, just like a general fiction. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like that also kind of checks out because those 3 I would consider my top 3 favorite, most consciously thought of genres. This year is so different than last year because I'm entering a mystery era, and mystery is clocking in at 4 books so far this year, which is exciting. I'm enjoying mysteries. I think until this year, one of my favorite books so far that I'll tell you about later has opened up this entire genre for me. Then we have thriller and nonfiction clocking in at 2 books each, which, Sydney, great work. I've read 2 nonfiction this year. I know that's not much, but it's better than last year. I don't remember how many nonfiction I read total last year, but I actually have like so many nonfiction on hold on my Libby app. I'm making a very conscious effort and I'm more excited about nonfiction this year, which I am really excited about. So that number will continue to increase, and that's, again, exciting. Underneath that is historical and horror at 1 apiece, which I am happy about the historical because I know that one of my goals this year was to read more genres. And I have completed 1 historical book. I'm in the middle of another historical fiction. And something of note is I did this chart of like what the book predominantly is. I know there are books that have multiple categories and say it's a mystery book, but it has a historical setting. Like that still could be considered like a historical fiction in some eyes. And I do like know that, so I'm giving myself even more credit every now and then, you know what I'm saying? But for this chart, just for like visual purposes, I wanted to assign each book a singular genre. The one that like stood out more for me and my brain at least. The one at the bottom is horror at 1. I'm a little bit upset about that because whenever someone asks me like, what's your favorite genre? I always do say like, I love fantasy, I love general fiction, I know I love romance and thriller. Like I do like a little bit of everything, but I also always say like, I love psychological horror, which I do. And I am so surprised that I have only read 1 so far this year. So that's gonna be changing. And I will say the one horror book that I've read this year was 5 stars. It was Monstrilio. Speaking of star ratings, let's hit up the breakdown. My average star rating is 4 stars, which always checks out. I think it's always hovering around 4 stars. I very much so like read for pleasure and I read books that I think I'm going to be enjoying. I do think that the longer that I continue to read for like my channel, I have gotten a little bit more observant, I guess I would say, towards things that I personally just don't enjoy in stories or writing styles and things like that. But for the most part, I have a good time. You know what I'm saying? I really tried to not do like half-star ratings, but on Storygraph, they make it so easy for you to do 0.5 or even 0.25 or 0.75. I at least limited myself to the 0.5, but there are some books that they're better than a 4-star, but they're not quite a 5-star. And I just like emotionally couldn't give it anything else. So in 5 stars, we have 7 books. 4.5 stars got 6 books. 4 stars was 11 books. 3.5 stars was 2 books. 3 stars, 3 books. 2 stars, 3 books. No 1 stars yet, which is surprising and suspicious. No rating is 2 books. Within that category of not rating it was because I have 1 DNF and 1 poetry collection. A couple other of my favorite things to track in terms of these little bookish stats is how were my books acquired. Of all of these books that I've read so far this year, I've read 47% of my owned TBR. So 14 books of these 32 I already owned. I read from my shelf, which is phenomenal. Good work, Sydney. Then going down to 33%, I read 10 books that I had just purchased sometime this year. 13% of my reads, which equates to 4 books, I was gifted. Then down to 7%, or 2 books of the total, I got from my library. We all know I love an audiobook. We also should all know that I love listening to an audiobook while physically reading it at the same time. It's my most preferred method of consuming a story. I think it's so fun and relaxing. So my stories were consumed 81%, 26 of these books were via audio and physical. This distinction is either I physically sat down, listened, and read at the same time, or it is also I had the audiobook and sometimes I would listen to it on audio and other times I would just be physically reading it. Both of those options are consolidated into this one piece of pie. The 16% or 5 books was on Kindle and audio, and it's the same exact thing. I had it on my Kindle, I had the audiobook, and I either did both at the same time or one or the other. And let me just say, for this stat, so many of these audiobooks were available through Libby for me, so I didn't actually have to purchase any of them. I also do have Everend. Spotify started doing audiobooks, and you're included like 16 hours or something every year with premium, and we have Spotify Premium. And of course, I have a Libro FM account, which is a phenomenal company, and I do have a discount code if you want to try out Libro FM. It supports a local indie bookstore of your choice. That link is down below if you want to check it out. So a lot of these audiobooks I didn't have to pay for, which is great. I use Libby every single day of my life. Going down to 3%, it was a physical book, and it was just one of them. I think it was the poetry collection. Yes, sure was. This is a really fun stat, which I was super excited to see. This is how many of these authors have I read from before, or are they new to me? 75% of the books that I've read so far are from authors that I have never read from before. That's 24 of the 32. I think that's pretty awesome. I found some really great books so far this year, have definitely found some authors that I will be picking up from again. And on the flip side, I have also found some authors that maybe I don't love, whether it be how they wrote a story, how they told a story, or whatever. Didn't mesh with what I like. And that's also exciting because I'm just honing in even more on my specific reading tastes. 25% or 8 of the books that I've read so far were repeat authors. And most of those I think were books in series. 5 of those 8 books were continuation of series. Okay, the last little pie chart I thought would be interesting and a good little segue into talking about content specific things. This little pie chart, it says mood versus required. I wanted to kind of put a number to how many books I read that were required of me in terms of my book club, or for a video video that had a specific TBR. An example of a video like that would be reading BookTuber's best books of 2023. I read 6 books for that video, so all of those would be under a required read. And the other piece of pie is the mood read space, so it would be any book that I chose out of my free will. Books that I choose for prompts of my Spin the Bottle TBR game also mostly fall under the mood read category, because even though they're like for a specific TBR, which is Spin the Bottle, I still chose those books and read them because I wanted to read them. So for required reads, which is book club or specific TBRs for project videos, 63%, so 20 of the 32 books I read for specific things. And then 38% or 12 books were just mood reads, books that I was interested in, I picked up and read it just for the hell of it. And honestly, the way that this pie chart is split up makes sense to me. I don't think that I would want the required portion to be any bigger than it is right now. I feel like around 60% makes sense, because I definitely love structured, like set TBR videos that require a lot of planning and work and things like that. Like those are so rewarding and those are so much fun. But I also think it's really important to be able, for me at least, to just pick up a book every now and then, because it sounds so exciting to be reading that specific story at that moment. Because when it comes down to it, reading is a form of self-care. It's really fun that I've been able to grow my channel to what it is and be able to be here and talk about books with you guys all the time. Like it's been an absolute dream. So having that balance is really important to me, and I feel like I've been doing a pretty good job at it. So I hope that this pie chart doesn't change too much. And then going into this specific content sort of style TBRs that I've been mentioning, just a little check-in on like how I feel like content's going. I've been really happy this year with how it's gone. I know I mentioned earlier about how January and February were very heavy, like structured TBR months, and I was thriving. I loved it. I loved those first 2 months of content so much. I was so excited to be reading, even though one of the videos was reading your guys' worst books of 2023. That sounds like it wouldn't be a super exciting video for me, because it's like technically I'm reading really bad books, but it's also like those types of videos are super fun because I would love to just see if I agree or not. Having those big like project style structured TBR videos are just so much fun. I really love them, and I always would love to have any recommendations that you guys might want to see for me, especially with those types of videos, because I love them. So of course, I think one of my favorite videos that I've done so far this year are those 3 videos of reading BookTuber's best books of 2023, reading your guys' best books, and your guys' worst books of 2023. Those were so fun. I also have one more video in that little series coming out. It's going to be an exclusive video for my Patreon. One of my patrons, Chris, had said, now hear me out. You've read the best, you've read the worst. What if you read our mid-ist books, like the most middle of the road books that we read last year? And I loved it. So I'm doing that video exclusively for them this month in April. But also in January, I did tier ranking every book that I read in 2023, as well as tier ranking every book club pick that we read for my book club. The book club tier ranking was an exclusive video for my book club. Obviously, I've been loving my Spin the Bottle game so far this year. Last year, I laxed the rules a lot, and it helped me sort of like get back into the swing of reading and creating content after a hectic year of 2022. So now this year, I made it a little bit more difficult again, added some more stipulations, and it's been going well. I've enjoyed the extra challenge, even though it is making things a little bit more difficult, but not too difficult. I'm still having a really good time, which is what I care about most. So the game has been going really well. I've been enjoying it. I went back and forth on whether I did an exclusive vlog for House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J. Maas. I felt like I had to, like emotionally, like I did it for the previous book, so I did it again for this one. And I think it turned out okay. I'm not mad about it, but it's not my favorite video that I've done this year. I did really like my Kindle Unlimited reading vlog, the one that I did over Valentine's Day weekend. And I read 3 Kindle Unlimited romance books that I don't know when I would have ever picked up. So it was a perfect opportunity. I do exclusive reading vlogs for my Patreon every month, because within my book club, we have a main pick and then a buddy read pick. Each book has an exclusive like thread on the Discord server that I run, and the main pick gets a live discussion while the buddy read pick gets an exclusive reading vlog from me. So we have a couple of those videos that I've done. We have the spring releases video, which I was obsessed. I was obsessed with this thumbnail, really happy about it. And I'm just really happy that I started doing those videos every season, because it really has helped me be on the lookout for what I'm excited about. And I think it's fun just to like share news of like what new and upcoming authors are creating, you know? Then we had our first challenge vlog of the year, which right next to the structured TBR like project videos, these are also my favorite. Challenge videos, like they're difficult to do, but they are so much fun. That was very successful. I've had 2 book hauls so far this year. I have another one brewing already. And then we have the monthly reading wrap-ups for the first 3 months as well. So in terms of January, February, March, those are all the videos and I feel pretty good about them. I'm excited about what the year is going to be holding. I do always love suggestions of what you guys might want to see from me. It gives me a little bit more of a like in tuned of what you're expecting, because of course I want to create what I want to create, but I also want to be put out things that we're both, all of us collectively are excited about. So feel free to suggest things down below. I'm always willing to entertain ideas. Now in terms of goals, let's check in. My goal is to read 75 books this year at least. My soft goal is 100. I hit it last year. I think I can do it again this year. But in terms of just beating 75, I'm 13 books ahead schedule, which is great. One of my goals is obviously to write more, like I mentioned. Last year I started a little work in progress, a little cozy fantasy adventure book with a little sprinkle of romance, and it's fun. I need to get back to it. I miss it dearly. I think about it every single day of my life, and I need to just start slotting in that time again. The first 2 months, January and February, with all those like reading for content heavy style videos that I was doing, I physically did not have the time to pursue both of those passions of like reading and also creating content, and then on the side writing. Oh, I thought about also trying my hand at writing a different genre. Like even though I have my fantasy work in progress, I might try I don't know, just like general contemporary fiction or romance I've thought about. So I think it could be fun to try to write a couple different genres and just see what I like the most. Because I know I've heard like you should write the book that you would love to read, and like my favorite's fantasy. So immediately I was like, oh, I should write a fantasy book. But I also want to see if maybe I like writing something else more or less or whatever. You know, kind of play around with it a little bit. I think evidently I'm doing a very good job at reading my physical TBR down and also giving myself a wider variety of genres. I think so far I'm doing a pretty good job at both of those things. For my physical self, I have been working out a little bit. I want to work on my consistency in the next quarter for sure, because I have been, but again, not at the rate that I would love to do for myself. So I want to get more consistent with exercise. Caleb and I have kind of fallen off our nighttime routine. We are still on the couch around 10:30, sometimes 11. And we need to get in bed earlier and get a couple pages in and then get sleepy earlier so that we can wake up and have our morning routine that we really like to do as well. So AM, PM routine could use some work. And then the last thing was like pick up a couple new hobbies, even though I have what time to do more hobbies, but things like baking, watercolor painting, I have started a little bit. I made a little like baby 3-tier cake to celebrate 4 years on BookTube. It was not very pretty looking, but I learned a lot and I'm excited to try again in the future. So baking is something that I do enjoy doing. I want to keep trying to do different things with that. And I also would love to try watercolor painting. I think it would be super fun. But okay, now let's talk about my favorite books so far that I've read this year. But first, I have to go start sprints with my patrons. So during the first sprint, I'll come back and we'll chat about books. Okay, so top 5 favorite books that I've read so far this year. They're not in any like very particular order, but I think the final 2 that I'll talk about definitely are like my top 2, I think. So I think Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll is in this top 5. I'm kind of surprised about it, but I think about it all the time. This is a story about the women, the victims of Ted Bundy, and it's like historical fiction, mystery, like a slow-paced thriller. And Ted Bundy's never named, but if you know about his crimes, then you know that these are his victims. And it's a story that's centered around just the women, just the victim's voice. And I think that that alone is such a great way to talk about the, you know, the severity of everything and give these women their time to talk about things. Jessica Knoll's writing was so great. I loved how she set things up. I loved how she explained and described things. I just think it was such a solid book and I really, really loved it. Next is actually a nonfiction. Who is she? It's Crying in H-Mart by Michelle Zauner. She is the lead singer for Japanese Breakfast, if you didn't know, and I love her music. I loved her memoir so much. It felt so well-rounded. Recurring themes that kept getting brought up and tied things together. I loved the audiobook because she narrates it and it was just heartbreaking. It was meaningful and I just loved it. I loved it. Next, I have to put it here. I do. We'll have The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. This is a reread. I read this way back, maybe in 2021, maybe 2020. I think it was 2021. I don't know. I don't care. I reread it this year. It was my book club pick for January, and it was so nice. It was really fun to be back in this world and be just reminded of why I love it so much and have that sort of like validation that it is really as good as I remembered. This is just the epitome of lyrical, flowery, poetic writing. This is the bar for me, and I have yet to find anything to top it. It is one of my favorite books ever, and it was so much fun to reread. Now, top 2. Okay, The Will of the Many by James Islington. So good. Such a good book. I'm so excited that I loved it as much as I did because I read it for the Booktuber's Best video, and I could not be happier that I actually did read it for it because I almost didn't. But it got brought up so many times, and it is so worth being on so many people's best lists because the writing is phenomenal, the story, the characters, everything is so fleshed out and real, and the setup for the second book is insanity. It is going to be such a good series if he continues writing the way that he wrote this book. Truly bananas at some points. I cannot wait to continue. There's really nothing that I don't love about this book. It was really, really beautifully crafted. And then the other one, tied for the top spot, is Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone by Benjamin Stevenson. This is the book. This is the book that opened up the mystery genre for me, and I don't think I'll ever be the same. This is so much fun. This is one of the best experiences of reading any book ever that I've had in a very long time. The twists literally had my jaw on the ground. I could not handle this book. It was just so much fun, so surprising. I loved how the narrator like broke the fourth wall all the time and was like talking to us about the story and about the mystery. It was so fun. It was great. I think this is a really great stack. You could take any of these 5 books as a recommendation for sure, and I'd be happy about them. I think 2 honorable mentions that I do want to mention. For romance, I really liked The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Madana, as well as Honey and Spice by Bolu Babalola. These are my top 2 romances that I've read so far this year. And then another honorable mention is going to be Ripe by Sarah Rose Etter. This is one that I don't really recommend to a lot of people because it is very hard. This is a book I would recommend looking up trigger warnings before going into it, but the writing was just perfect. I think it encapsulated this main character and these situations so perfectly that I can't help but give it a 4.5 to a 5 stars. Like, I haven't stopped thinking about this one either. So any of these books that I've mentioned, they were great. They were really great. But I think that that's it. I really love stats videos. I hope you guys liked this and seeing all of the little charts and things like that. Let me know down below if you have any suggestions for me for videos or ideas for the next stats video that I do, things that you might want to know or see. I'm always happy for suggestions. So yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for being here and hanging out with me for a little bit. If you don't know what to say down below, then leave me the crossed swords emoji. And while you're down there, please do subscribe and like the video. I always appreciate your support. And of course, be kind to one another and happy reading. Bye.